Hi and welcome to episode 3 of AI Webster. Today we have a sponsor, the Hampton Inn in Newport, Kentucky. I was visiting one of my offspring in Lexington, Kentucky, and Newport's right across the Ohio River from Cincinnati. It's a great place. Cincinnati's an amazing town. But anyway, today's episode is focused on loss and the impression. And there will be some whimsy, but there'll be a lot of woe in this episode. If you're feeling like you are not ready for a lot of woe, say whoa. Let the algorithm find you a brand new video to watch. This one is going to be a little bit sad. I'll start off by apologizing. All the names I've forgotten over my 35 years of teaching. It's an awful experience when I run into a student, former student, or worse yet, a present student, and I've forgotten their name. I can see that they look a little crestfallen, especially if we had a positive relationship. But the point I wanted to make was that even though I only have 2 gigabytes of memory, so when I get 180 new students in a year, I probably lose about 180 former students. Not everyone, but many of them. But I don't lose the impression that the student made. So I want to go back and look at an example of 2 friends who graduated from Earl Haig in 2006. Might have been 7, but I'm pretty sure it was 6. One I taught in grade 12 English, and she was an excellent student. I don't want to say her name. She's a lawyer now. I'll call her L. And her friend was captain of the dragon boat team. We'll call her C. And somehow I got persuaded into being a shore coach for the dragon boat team back in 2006 or 7. And the teacher who normally did it, I think, was away on some sort of 4/5 leave or something. But anyway, I lived down in that area near Sunnyside. So what I'd do is I'd bike home, I'd scarf back some food, grab my daughter, and we'd head down to Sunnyside Beach. And all I had to do was legally be present and have a cell phone. Funnily enough, I was only in my early 40s. I didn't have a cell phone at the time. There weren't even smartphones. But the captain of the dragon boat, the young woman we'll call letter C, she lent me her flip phone or her Nokia brick. I don't know, I can't remember what it was. But it did have some sort of little bauble on it. And my daughter, who was probably 3 or 4 at the time, maybe, I think 3, she loved that. And C and my daughter had a connection, as is often the case with toddlers and teenage girls. There's some maternal instinct that kicks in. Anyway, at the end of the season, C gave my daughter a little bauble. I think it was Winnie the Pooh or something, but it was on a little string. And that meant something to my daughter. That teenager who she connected with fueled her in whatever way. About 3 years later, I had probably forgotten C's name, probably on my way to forgetting L's name. But we were at a staff meeting, and Brian Clark, who was the head of social science at the time, stood up and said that a former student of Earl Haig had died in a tragic plane crash with 2 other people just north of Toronto. Then he began to describe the student and what she did. And I figured out it was C. And I felt as if a plunger had vacuumed up, sucked out the oxygen from my lungs and the blood from my heart. It was devastating that this wonderful young girl in her 3rd year studying at Seneca, aviation, had perished. It was terrible. Anyway, years passed, and probably a full 10 years passed, and her friend, L, showed up outside of room 213, and I didn't recognize her. She had become an adult. She was a lawyer now, and she was doing a nostalgic tour around Earl Haig. And she dropped by after school, and I was tidying up or getting ready for tomorrow's lessons or what have you. And she said, do you remember me? And I said, no, I don't recognize you. And I could see she was a bit disappointed, perhaps hurt. And then she told me her name, her full name, and right away I knew exactly who she was, but I don't think she believed that. So I told her, I remember, this is where you sat. I knew you had a part-time job at Loblaws. I knew the mark she got. And most importantly, I knew she was C's really good friend. By the time I got to that detail, we were both welling up a bit with tears at the tragic loss of this young woman. And I remembered her name again. It was cemented in. Recently, in 2024, I was cleaning out the memory of an old iMac computer I had that had movies, home movies basically, and I came across one that was a student promotional thing I had made with a number of my grade 12s back in 2006. And there was Elle. And I started to think about how she, almost like a skipping stone that, puts ripples in the water every few meters, how she popped back into my memory again. And then I started to look up C's name on the internet, and I found out about the plane crash and that it was in 2010. And I happened upon a photograph of her online related to her funeral or what have you. And the distortion of time was wild. I couldn't believe that the photograph looked so old, but she died 14 years ago. And of course it looked that way in the photograph. And it broke my heart, thinking that now she would be in her early 30s, perhaps, fully employed, gainfully employed, likely with a family, and her parents never got to see their grandchildren. So I memorized her name, of course, involuntarily, as with her best friend. But I say this story to illustrate that it doesn't really matter whether the teacher remembers your name. They remember you if you made an impression. Now, some people don't make impressions. Some people are NPCs or houseplants or passengers in the classroom. They don't do anything. And you could turn around and ask the teacher 2 months from graduation, do you remember me? And they will have forgotten you, probably. There were some teachers like Victoria Surtees who remembered every kid's name forever. But I was never like that. I wish I was. So I was always slightly embarrassed. Logically, I knew that when a student returned to Earl Haig and said, hey, do you remember my name? I was forgiving of myself because I had so many students and so much responsibility. But at the same time, I always felt awful, to be frank, because I let them down, and it means something to me. So if you happen upon a former teacher and you see them, and you like them, do them a favor and say, hi, it's me, Bucky. Do you remember? You taught me in 2017. I graduated. Yeah. Oh, yeah, I went on to TMU and blah, 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 blah. If they smile, they remember you with a positive impression. If they look dead-faced, either they don't or they're dead inside. Thank you.
Seize the day today, come to you.